Jam on toast!
Hey there everybody, welcome to the Jam. I'm Cameron. Today the toast is to Stardust. Now this is a response to Harry Movie Club. Go over to Mr. Harry Britt's channel for all your Harry needs. And Alan, I can't say thank you enough. This is definitely easily in my top 10 movies. And I'll say up front too that it's probably the best romantic adventure story since Princess Bride. So the short sale is that a young man tries to go to this magical kingdom to bring back a star. Yes, there's reasons, but if I do that, then I have to continue on and it's not a short sale anymore. My love for this one, despite all the wonderful, wonderful things throughout this movie, is that especially I like the special effects scenes. There's the scene at the end with the Babylon candle, the Septimus water effects scene, where Yvain's trying to attack Ditchwater Sal. All beautiful, beautiful, lovely scenes, and they're not things that you normally see. It's wonderful to really see that and to see someone put that much work into making it look that good as a spectacle and make it mean something in the movie. Usually you just have big explosions for big explosions' sake, and these effects take purpose in the movie, or more specifically to the story. My hate it for this one is, where are my other stories? Where are my other movies? There are so many untold stories throughout this that I want more. I want prequels. I want a whole movie on why the Witches 3 are these evil witch queens. That one scene with Ditchwater Sal talking to Michelle Pfeiffer's character, that deserves the backstory right there. And maybe it's a short story, but I'd like to know how Una came to be with Ditchwater Sal. It's worth telling. Most importantly, I want that story of last time there was a star in the kingdom. You could tie in, maybe not the 7 brothers, but maybe the 12 from the previous king. It was 200 years ago, so who knows what kind of timeline that actually hits. If you'll notice, time doesn't really flow there like it does in our world. But as far as this movie goes, it's the scene where, of course, the villain lets the hero go because she thinks she's got one up. She didn't really get anything out of it. The whole thing was with the star shining brighter, and that didn't happen because it wouldn't happen given the scenario, because she's still going to be scared to death. MVP for this one, we've got Robert De Niro with a fantastic character and performance. The characters of Tristan and Septimus were done very well and true to form, just maybe the characters weren't strong enough for me. The witches were really good. They were great villains that include Ditchwater Sal in that. But other than Michelle Pfeiffer, they weren't really wowing. And even then, she was kind of an idiot about things. She was very arrogant about wasting magic when it was obviously very precious. So that really leaves the beautiful Claire Danes. Really always touched my heartstrings since Romeo and Juliet. But the character especially, I think you could have thrown almost any pretty lady into that role. And as long as they performed nearly as well as Claire Danes did, I think that character would have got to you. And Claire Danes definitely nailed it. I think people would have had trouble competing with her for that role. She's just got such an expressive face and she's truly good at using that. And her voice carries right along with it. So let's move on to the categories. Aesthetics. The music and the sound effects in this are basically perfect. I can't sit here and like hum any tunes to you, but in the moment, in the scene, they help you feel what you're supposed to feel for the movie. The characters are all done up real well to look how they're supposed to look. It looks very accurate, but maybe cautioning on the side of clean, which is good. And all the characters are very expressive about where they are, and especially if you watch scenes, the positioning is taken into importance. Anytime that you are seeing two characters that are adversarial, they're very much face on face, and you've got a very peripheral view of it. Just offhand, I would say the scenes with Ditchwater Sal and the Queen Michelle Pfeiffer character, and then De Niro and Ferdy, the tradesman, Septimus and his soothsayer, and even Septimus and Ferdy, it's the same principle there. The lightning effects are really cool. Of course, I mentioned that they have some great magical effects in this. They use that chain really well. Michelle Pfeiffer's character is constantly changing in appearance throughout the entire movie. It is a little off-putting that Una doesn't seem to age as much as anyone else, but she's been magicked for whatever long. Ditchwater Sal actually doesn't seem to age that much either, now that I think about it. But those are forgivable. It's one or two characters, and there's no explanation of how time works in this magical kingdom. The witch is expressed 200 years like it's nothing, but maybe it is nothing there, and it's all silly. But maybe it's a silly thing to even think about. To get a little bit meta, the characters actually go through transformation, specifically aesthetically. He actually gets his hair lengthened. Van gets a slight makeover on the ship, but mostly it's Tristan. He's actually being groomed to look like a buccaneer of some kind, which honestly is a really good foreshadow technique that I haven't seen too many times before, where it's like we're going to dress him up to be this big hero guy, and he's going to fulfill the role mostly because we're making him look the role now. I love the idea of an airship, even if it's being used as a giant lightning rod. That was beautiful to see. When she's creating the inn, that was amazing. They really did some great work. Even doing as simple a thing as making Billy look like a goat. Magnificent. And it was a beautiful touch to the little details they pay attention to throughout the movie. Like Bernard gets transformed into a goat and into the girl, and then like they take that moment where they're just kind of looking at themselves, and he goes to touch his breast and he gets yelled at, and then they're in the stables. It's a wonderful touch because they didn't have to do it. They have Bernard actually speak in a deeper tone than a young lady would, so it offsets things. Honestly, really paid attention to details here, and I'm so happy for it. It really makes a great movie. Aesthetics gets a 96. Character development. Oh my gosh, so many great characters and so much story fit into one thing. Even at the beginning of the movie, when we have this narrator voicing things, and we've got the guy who guards the wall, he's got his own development there. He goes from trusting old man to friggin' older kung fu guy. Tristan's dad is obviously developed quick, fast, and in a hurry, but he goes from being a somewhat irresponsible, wandering youth to being a rather responsible father. We don't get a lot of in between, but we can see that Tristan's well brought up, and his dad obviously cares about him, but that development of his father just goes to show us what Tristan's like at his age, because like father, like son, apparently, and Tristan is not afraid of the wall either. Though he is rather in love with the girl in the town, and she gets her own good role of character development, being that she doesn't want anything to do with him, but she'll use him when the time comes right. And to me, her character is rather ridiculous, and I've been guilty of liking my fair share of ill-suited women in my life. But I really felt for Tristan there that he was not in a good situation, but he did, in very noble efforts, go for it, and he ended up in an entirely magical adventure, through which we get to see him grow in a very rapid pace, it would seem, meeting characters like Yvain, who are inherently magical themselves, much like the unicorn she meets. Not that Tristan has much involvement there, but they enter a dialogue, having conversation. They take a short journey together, in which you get a small feel for the unicorn's character, as apparently he's smart enough to disenchant a chain, so he must be worthy enough of the conversation Yvain gives him in the short amount of time we get from it. All the way on our way to meet the witch, who we get this brief exposition of what happens with stars and witches and what happened to the last star, and I just want more of, but they develop those characters really well in a very efficient manner, so you get the idea that these are witches and what their goals are and what their interaction with each other might be, at least as far as the situation presents itself. And then as we're following the princes and watching them watch their father die and kill each other, or attempt to anyways, we're seeing what kind of people these guys are, even though not all of them are really as bloodthirsty as Septimus, but that's probably why he's on top. Because as he's killing his way to the stone, he's showing us who he is and what he is. He's not exactly reacting to the situation so much as directing himself in the situation, which I really like to see with characters, because this is a scene where, like, we don't have truly a main character. The next best example I can point out to this is Pirates of the Caribbean. You have several major or epic level characters, if you will, running through the same story, and they just kind of cross paths. They're not really so much against each other all the time. They're always on their own sides. So as we continue on through things, we see the different character when she reaches the inn in Yvain than when we're hit De Niro's pirate ship. And just seeing him go through in the meta of him explaining his character development to Tristan and Yvain, his reputation with his crew versus his enemies, the fact that he likes dresses and whatnot. It's never really clear to say that he's gay, but I think it's clear enough to infer, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a wonderful, progressive implementation of such a character, because you respect the character on its merits and not necessarily on his orientation or stylization. And I'll admit that from there on, it's much of a growth of Tristan and Yvain as a pairing. But as we get to the end and we see the witches, we see final things come out of it where not appreciative of her sister so much, and that becomes more clear, and it's just development in not only the characters but as the world as a whole of what witches are here, because it's never really explained. It's never explained where magic comes from. It's just part of who they are and what the world is, and it's great to see the world build as a character throughout the entire movie. Character development gets to 97. Storyline. Now, I've already given away a lot of the story, and I strive never to do that in my reviews. This is an example, like Pirates of the Caribbean, of multi-threading the story. You can break this out into a dozen different stories following any of the really named characters almost, with exceptions being maybe Ferdy or Ditchwater Sal, though her version of the story would be kind of interesting. Granted, Captain Shakespeare really doesn't have that much involvement with the rest of the world as well, so perhaps it wouldn't be as interesting there either. But if you take the witches as a character, Tristan, Yvain, Septimus, or the princes as a whole, you get a very interesting story from their perspective. They're trying to go after a goal, there's this thing in their way, they've got to reach it and overcome adversaries and obstacles to get there. It's beautiful that they did this in at least a half dozen different routes. It is beautiful that they did this in half a dozen different routes that all intertwine and weave together to make such a wonderful overall story. The best part about that is that you can always back up and you can stop viewing the story as a character's adventure and view it as an event happening in the world. I love any story you can do that with, I really do. In comparison, I always find the idea of a main character boring when you could just have the world be the character and things happening within it. And they pay as much detail to the story itself as in the scenes, because they take into account that he's got the Babylon candle when he does and when he doesn't. They take into effect the flower. Throughout the entire story, they're tracking how much magic the main witch has. It's amazing how much time and effort they must have put into just the storyline itself, that I feel truly lucky to be able to experience something like this. Granted that I don't get enough story for me, I want more, I want more, I want more, but we get a decent prologue and we get a decent epilogue, and they wrap everything in between up nicely. It's amazing to think that we've got such good story arcs. They're really written like chapters of a book or progressions in a video game, if we want to use a more modern stylization. As much as I need to go back and watch Princess Bride, I'm so glad I've got this story as part of my repertoire. Storyline gets a 98. Compulsion. This movie is as fun as it is deep. You're constantly inundated with new things happening and new characters and new developments on those characters, and it's not taxing. If you look at movies like Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch, there is a lot going on there, and it's a little bit of effort to keep track of it. This is really kept into nice, neat rows for you. Yeah, there's this prince guy running around, but when it comes back to him, you kind of remember what's going on with him, and the important thing is that he wants Stone and kill his brothers. Same thing with Primus. Same thing when Ditchwater Sal shows up. You know who she's got conflicts with in the story. Doesn't matter how often she shows up. This is a fun, easily accessible movie, and frankly, I could watch Claire Danes in almost anything all day long. But the fact that we get such great performances out of the actors, De Niro especially, I think he really nailed that part. I never would have seen that coming from him. And Michelle Pfeiffer also did an excellent job. She really kind of owned the arrogant witch thing. What a great movie for pretty much anyone. Compulsion gets a 98. Now, if you throw all that up together, you get an average of 97.25. To me, that makes it a must-have, and I would guarantee this movie. If you really don't like it, I would even pay you for the copy. For my wrap review, I've got to say, see this now. It's so great, and I hope I didn't spoil too much of the movie for you, but this is a movie really you got to watch on your own, come to your own conclusion, and it is worth every second of your time. In fact, I've got the urge to go watch it again right now. It's so rare that you really see a movie come together on pretty much all sides. Great story, great writing, great direction, great production. great performances, great casting in general, great world development, great character development. It's just great, 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 great. Thank you so much if you stuck through all that. I think that's it for me. I'm Cameron. If you don't like me, bite me. If you want to see anything else we're up to, go ahead and click the annotations, and they'll take you to our other channels.